So the next series of pole floats I like to use on rivers is the Edge Tackle N3 series. This is a kind of pencil type float. So as you can see, it's a very slim design. It's got a long tapered balsa body with a very short stainless steel stem and a 1.2 millimeter plastic tip. Available in yellow and orange, but I'm pretty much use yellow all the time, so I haven't got any orange with me on this series. But these floats are absolutely great for a number of different situations, particularly when you're targeting fish on rivers that are slower moving and a little bit deeper. It's a great float for when you're fishing with a long pole, short line, and also when you're fishing with a whip to hand. The nature of the float, it's a very efficient float for catching fish quickly, typically when you're using a bulk like an olivette or a bulk of shot. And the nature of the float means that it's a float that you're not going to be able to hold back hard to present a bait near the bottom. It's a float that you're going to present into the peg, into the swim, get it down to where the fish are feeding and get a bite and benefit from the fact that they've got a lovely streamlined shape which exits the water very cleanly when you're striking. So it's kind of a positive float in terms of catching a lot of fish quickly. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're big fish, could be small fish like little roach and gudgeon and small perch, but again, you know, you're going to probably encounter some bonus fish as well. It's just a really interesting float to set up in a lot of different situations. So this range we've got from a half a gram up to 2 gram. So we've got 5 different sizes there, all perfectly designed for each capacity. And the float that I've set up today, I've actually set it up on my 6 meter CP 200 whip, and I've set it up with an olivette type shotting pattern. So I'll just talk about that and then we'll talk about the actual components of the rig. So in this situation, I've set up a 1.5 gram float and I've got a 1.25 olivette, which is enabling me to add some shot to the rig to get it up to the 1.5 gram capacity. So what I've actually got is I've actually shotted these up with number 9 shot. So I've got one number 9 either side of the olivette, and then I've got 3 down the line to play with. So it's not a type of float in this configuration where I'm going to be spreading shot out and fishing on the drop. I much prefer the N1 and N2 style of float for that, as I previously discussed. But the nice thing with this is I can play about with the dropper shot. So in this situation I've got a nice drop in the bottom sort of 2 foot, you know, 30 to 50 centimeters, where I'm going to get a drop of the number 9 shot. It's quite positive, so I'll be able to register that. It's going to get the bait down quite quickly, but I can still, if needed, pull the bulk up, spread those shot out to give us a nicer fall of the hook bait through the water once the olivette has settled. Another great shotting pattern is the double bulk. In that case, I'm just going to pull these 3 number 9s down, and again I'm going to separate them slightly. So I've got that classic double bulk situation where you can really read and register the bites when the fish are feeding confidently, or if you're targeting smaller fish and you need a more positive type of bite registration. Using a slightly shorter hook length on this rig than I was on the other 2 rigs where I was fishing on the drop, and typically I'd be using between about 10 centimeters to 15 centimeter hook lengths with this type of rig, and I have used a loop to loop method of joining the hook length to the main line, because if I'm changing the hook, catching a lot of fish, need to change the hook, I'm not eating into my main line doing the figure of 8 knot that I used on the other 2 rigs. So on the whip, elastic wise, you can see I've elasticated the number 2 and part of the number 1. I've actually cut the flick tip off below the splice, so I've got that stub there of number 1, and I've got the elastic through the number 2 as well. And in this case, this is the edge tackle 4 to 6 elastic. Brilliant elastic to use in the whip. Obviously gives you the nice bit of cushion. You got the action of the pole as well. So again, it's surprising what fish you can land if you hook a bonus fish like a bream or a chub or a big perch or even an eel on this type of rig with a lighter hook length and a smaller hook. So the main line for this float, for most of the time I use the 012 premium mono. Enables me to use a variety of hook lengths from right down to 0.6mm up to about 0.95 in both fluorocarbon and in premium mono. Like I say, it's quite a positive rig, and similar for the hooks really. Just love the fine matching from 22 down to about 18, depending on the baits. But if I was fishing a heavier hook length, then I probably would go for the carbon match, just depending on the stamp of the fish and the venue that I'm fishing. So this rig is, as I mentioned at the start, equally useful when you're fishing on a long pole with a short line or on a whip. But for me, this is my kind of go-to float when I'm fishing a whip and I'm targeting a slower river, perhaps like deeper sections of the Warwickshire Avon, the Bristol Avon, the Don, that type of venue. Not too affected by fast water and perhaps not too affected by the wind. So that's another tremendously versatile float, and one that I use in lots of river situations.